Yo guys, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Zenitsu inspired Surge Spellblade. Zenitsu is a character from the anime called Demon Slayer, which is on Netflix. If you want to give it a watch, it's actually pretty good. And I guess if you don't know what the character does, he is a lightning based kind of character that can only really do one thing, and that is dash, but still be pretty OP and pretty strong, and at the same time look really cool. Which is kind of maybe want to make a similar esque build in Last Epoch. Only difference is, I guess, is I'm not using a katana. I'm dual wielding for one, so it's not like perfectly matched. But I guess the concept is there of, I guess, building up the momentum and then unleashing it at the same time, which is kind of what Zenitsu does in the anime, which I think is really cool. And I guess the other difference is the lightning is not yellow; it's blue. But hey, it's not that much different, right? So, before further ado, let's get into it. First of all, we're going to run through the passives. So, I've actually invested 32 points into my mage passive point and about 81 points into my Spellblade tree, with using 4 points in Scholar just to get the extra mana, a bit more health, 8 points in Elementalist just to increase my elemental damage, as that is the main source of damage for this build. Obviously, I've increased my attack speed by 15% and cast speed just so you could get a little bit faster, just a bit more fluid, make it feel a bit nicer. I've got 10 points into Knowledge of Destruction, allowing me to have extra crit chance and crit multiplier, and I've got 5 points in Sun and Storms, which allows me to do extra lightning damage, which is, as I said, the main source of this build. For the Spellblade tree, I've put 6 points into Elemental Affinity, which gives me elemental damage and elemental resistances. I've got Infused Weapon, which gives me further lightning melee attack damage. I've also got Arcane Warden just to get a bit more ward, keep me alive, because this build is not that much defense, I guess, based. It's more pure damage, and while leveling it I did die quite a few times. That is definitely something I've got to say. And if you want to change the build, I guess, a little bit, it's quite versatile in terms of how you can play it. It gives you a lot of options, and there's quite a few points which you don't really need to invest in. For example, you don't need those 4s in Scholar, you can invest them somewhere else. Other points which aren't like 100% guaranteed is if you don't want to do a wield, you can do this build with a two-handed sword, katana, kopesh, or any kind of really weapon that has decent attack speed and offers you the lightning damage that you need to, I guess, have the highest output possible to min-max, really. Continuing though, I've put 5 points into Stormblade, absolutely a must. I feel like with this build, melee lightning damage, Spark Charge chance with lightning melee attacks 25%, can't go wrong with that. Got an Essence Duel, increase my melee attack speed even further. I've put Gemini, or as I said earlier, I feel like this build is much better with dual wielding. Obviously attack speed is great. As I said, it's a bit squishy, extra 15% damage taken while dual wielding, but while dual wielding, I'm allowed to have more points in terms of damage, as both of my swords, or I guess any kind of combination that you need, it will allow me to have more stats. I've got 8 points in Prismatic Blade, which I also feel like is a must. A lot of the dexterity is really good, and lightning damage again. I've got 10 points into Volker's Razor, increase elemental damage with high cost melee attacks. That's for cost ability which costs over 10 mana, which obviously Surge does. I've got 5 points in Awe Strike, which gives me further melee lightning damage. And I've got these two here, Prodigy and Mental Fortitude, to give me that a little bit extra ward intelligence for, I guess, survivability. And finally, probably the most important, really, I guess, point you can add on this build is Blade Weaver. As you can see on the screen, it basically stacks up to 10 times. And when ability is off cooldown, I believe. Let me have a quick look. Yep. So that means that I can have up to an additional 150% damage on my next ability, which is a shit ton. It's a lot. And it's kind of like what is making my damage so huge with this build, as you saw at the beginning of the video, where I can easily hit anywhere between 160,000 up to 300 plus thousand. I think the highest were I've ever gotten was about 410, and I was considering that on the character that you saw, I'm still only level 75 and I haven't maxed out my build. I don't have all the best exalted weapons or armies, and I don't have the best idols. So in terms of min maxing, the capabilities of this build are huge, very very like humongous even. What you saw was just maybe about, I guess, the build at 60%. I feel like there's so much more that's able to do. And I said it's very versatile. You don't need to follow this build. You can do what you want to do in the grand scheme of things. In terms of abilities, I am using Flame Void, I'm using Static, I'm using Enchant Weapon, Firebrand, and obviously Surge as the main parts of this, the main core of this build. Obviously, majority of these abilities in Spellblade tree, and you'll get these a bit later on with leveling. In terms of how you want to do it, I don't think it's too much of a problem. When I first started leveling, I used Glacier as my main source of damage, and I later on changed it. I felt like that was the easiest. It did a good amount of damage, and it worked quite well for the items that I currently had, or I had at the beginning when I was leveling. In terms of putting points into Flame Void, on the other side, I've put a few points largely into obviously getting more voids, getting mana efficiency, I guess increasing the duration. I've only changed it to this one, for example, Lightning Void. It's not really a necessity, I just like it. I just wanted to put it there just because it makes life that little bit extra easier, and it's lightning. I just wanted to base it on lightning. Um, more ward retention, just keep that ward for longer, I suppose. Allows you to, because obviously my basic attacks in this build build up ward whenever I hit enemies. On top of obviously having flame ward gives me extra ward, I'm able to then stack it on top of each other and actually keep my ward at a pretty decent level without allowing it to really decrease significantly or at too fast of a pace. In terms of static, this is more of a passive ability. I don't ever really use this ability. It's more so I build it to the maximum stacks because it helps me deal more damage with Surge. So in terms of abilities which are necessity, or points which are nodes which are necessity in this build, I would probably go for overcharge, just increasing my maximum amount of charges so I can increase my damage to the absolute full for Surge. I've also added some more damage and stuff in case I ever feel like I need to use the ability, because obviously the way to build stacks is just by moving around. It's not too difficult. If you feel like you use this ability quite often but at the same time you're struggling to, I guess, keep up the stacks, you can also put points into reverberation. I know I said that probably wrong, but that's okay. I don't know, you can even put some points into fulminating blows, just to make sure that you get those points up as quickly as possible. In terms of enchant weapon, it's kind of been a diagonal tree. I've put obviously a lot of points into damage and attack speed. I've put 3 points into celerity. You can probably put more if you wanted to. It's not, 3 isn't the minimum or the maximum. As I said, this build is very versatile. I've put 5 points into thundering, obviously get all the damage I can get. I put 3 points into melee shock, just because really I only needed 2 realistically to invest into these 2 nodes. So you can use the spare point and put it somewhere else. I've put 2 points into draw power just to get myself that little bit of extra survivability. As I said, with this build, I tend to struggle whenever I was leveling, and even now later on, although I can crit for huge amounts, I still feel like I need that extra little bit of lifesteal to keep me alive at high level. So I've got a bit of a leech, obviously. Then afterwards I've got concentration, just so I can then invest further down the tree, just to increase the duration. Honestly, for this one, you obviously need a minimum of 2 to get efficacy, which is in my opinion one of the most important nodes on this tree, which reduces the mana cost of this ability to 0 as full points. and then also increases my melee damage by 40%, which is quite significant. And also I've got Kindling Blade, which automatically recasts the ability whenever it's off cooldown. And this is, I guess, more of a quality of life kind of ability. Obviously, I've got a 60% keyboard because I play quite a few FPS games. If you've got the numlock, I guess, a full extended keyboard with the numpad on the right side, then you're able to use the numpad trick where you can set the ability to automatically cast. So realistically, you can, for example, get a point from Fulminate and get this point from Kindling Blade, and you can put it into celerity to increase your attack speed even further, or maybe even increase your leech, whatever you feel is necessary. In terms of Firebrand, I've put Searing Brand, 5 points, get the damage, 1 point into Incineration, maximum points, and 1 point Illuminating Fire. Obviously, this is one of probably the most important nodes on this tree in general for all Spellblade builds, which use Firebrand, because on 3 stacks, so basically 3 basic attacks, kind of 3 attacks with Firebrand, your next ability is guaranteed to crit, which is obviously a fantastic. It allows you to min-max and fully utilize your damage. I've put 2 points into Wildfire, increasing my stacks. I've put some points into Pyro Shielding, get some more ward whenever I attack. I've put myself some Fading Flame, just so I can get that little bit of extra ward per stack whenever I use an ability. I've also put Galvanize, just so I can change the damage to electric. I've put 3 points into Fulmination, more attack speed because you can never go wrong with it. And finally, the core of this build, Surge. 5 points into Shocking Blows. This is an absolute must. Getting that melee lightning damage is what is going to allow you to deal with the most damage as you possibly can with this ability. I've also put points into Conduit. So basically, this ability allows me to deal more damage with static charge, which comes back to static. Having all overcharge at 200, having 200 stacks is a lot better than having 100. It increases my damage by a lot. It's really helpful. I've got Lightning Rush to deal a bit more damage, and I've got Shielding Advance, which allows me to be invulnerable whenever I'm using the ability. It's just more, again, helpful in terms of survivability. I've got 2 points into Jolt. You don't really need that extra point. I've put 2 just because I wasn't really sure where to put it, and I've got this random point and Expanse of, again, 2 points spare, which I'm not entirely sure where to put. I think it's okay. You can probably put it into Storm Ages to get that extra further survivability, which I've been very much mentioning so far throughout the video. It's very important. And Storm Battery, 5 points, extra damage. Once the ability is on cooldown, if I hit an enemy 10 times, up to 10 times, I stack 10, basically 100% extra damage within this ability, which is extremely useful. And I would recommend everybody to have this. Absolutely. In terms of items, realistically, as I said, this build is quite versatile. You can choose whatever you want. Obviously, this is on the Last Epoch build planner. You can obviously, I'll have this linked in the description, by the way, so you can have a look at, just give yourself an idea as to kind of what to expect. I've put myself, I guess, the weapons that I would personally use and I currently have on my build, and that is Exalted Crescent Axe and Crystal Sword, with the Exalted Tier 7 melee lightning damage. I feel like that would be the ideal in terms of the stats that you're gonna get from your weapons. Obviously, getting specifically melee lightning damage would be the most effective. Just lightning damage would be also really good, and the least effective would be getting elemental damage, because in terms of the way this game calculates your damage output, is the formula when using specifically melee lightning damage has a higher multiplier than the other ones, so it gives you the most damage in the grand scheme of things. I've also put the same for Crystal Sword, and I've added increased lightning damage on both of this with chance to shred armor and chance to shock on hit, which is just more quality of life, and I guess allowing me, since I'm using Firebrand quite often, it's my main source of, I guess, the build up for the damage with this build. It allows me to maybe shred armor. There's obviously a high chance to then allow me to do even more damage with Sage. In terms of idols, generally you should probably focus on having lightning damage. If you want, there's also the option of going a different path in terms of building this Zenitsu build, and that's if you focus on getting 300 mana. There's some idols which increase your damage, and if you got 300 mana, then the damage as per the idol is doubled, which you can obviously fill up. The way to do it, you have to change a few things, and you probably have to invest into the sorcery tree and get some mana from, for example, wisdom. Overall, I think that this build is really fun. Um, I've, as I said, other than being squishy, I haven't found personally had any problems with it. It was fun. It does a lot of damage, and I had a lot of fun actually creating this character. In terms of what to do next, that's a fantastic question. If you've watched this far into the video, thank you very much, and I appreciate you. If you like the content, please leave a like, maybe subscribe, that'd be fantastic. And if you want to see something similar to this, then please leave a comment as to the kind of build you want to see. I'm going to try to do maybe like a video like this every week, maybe every 2 weeks, depending on how able I am in terms of having time, because obviously I've got real life things I need to do. I've got work, I've got studies and whatnot. Also, another thing, I've tried to stream recently. So, if you want to talk to me or ask me questions live, then I stream about 3 to 4 times a week. If you, I'll have my channel linked in the description down below. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in a bit. I'm now gonna cue a gameplay of this class, I guess, of me running through a monolith and me trying out the damage just to show you how good this class is, or this build is. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in a bit.